Hi, welcome to episode 3 of the Personal Style series. So, just to recap, the first episode was about personal style, the second was the style aesthetic. So, if you missed those two episodes, they are streaming in YouTube right now, and then this episode will also be streaming after the live next week. So let's begin with this episode. So what I want to kind of discuss today is how to find the brands to fit your personal style. I think like a lot of you had asked previously for me to recommend brands, and I've been very hesitant about it because I think that because there are so many silhouettes and so many different body types in Kibi, I don't want to make like brand recommendations in that kind of sense. So what I'm gonna do this year in brand recommendations is like how to look for quality and workmanship and things like that. So um, I am gonna do some brand recommendations, but things that like again, I am talking about wardrobe curation. I really want to promote the idea of wardrobe curation and changing the mindset of how, you as a consumer consume fashion, just general. I don't care if it's high-end fashion, mid-tier, or fast fashion. I just don't want the overconsumption of fashion in general. Because I think that if you practice over consuming fashion, and this is only a thing that is maybe like 20 years that happened, that we change our mindset of how we consume fashion, because fashion is made so accessible that too many of us are just taking like the accessible to um, a way that is not environmentally friendly. And there's a whole I mean, like I'm sure you know that there is like a ton of people talking about sustainable fashion, right? And blaming the brands for their bad practices. And I and what I want to do is the flip side. Is we know what the problem of the fashion brands are, but I also kind of want to you know have you as the equal partner of taking accountability of not over consuming fashion in general and changing your shopping habits, and this is why I am doing this series today, on episode 3 of how to find the brands that fit into your personal style and your personal style aesthetic. Um, so first things first, going back to I said before, like the way men shop, you know, and I've done this and before, like with since I've done this with working in menswear. So the way that men shop is different than women. So men are a lot more brand loyal in the way they shop. Where they find a brand that they like, they will stick to it. And then where women are how they shop is they shop based on design and aesthetic, and that's what I want to focus on today is how women shop, and how to find the brands that really like have you as a target customer. So they have you in your body proportions, your style aesthetic, um, and even like the sizing. I think like there's a lot of people who, think that fashion brands aren't that size inclusive. And yes and no to this problem is the brands that are established, they already have the target customer, and those brands are successful with those target customers. So if they're successful with what they're doing, the likelihood of them changing the business model is less likely. But in the last couple of years, there are more emerging brands that cater to many more sizing. So I think that you as a shopper, I've tried to give like tips on how to find those more size inclusive brands. And because fashion is so accessible online, that looking for brands, specifically for things that you're looking for, you know typing in the right words will pop up articles about it. There are a lot of plus size people writing about it. There are a lot of mid size people writing about different brands. So you just need to find those people who are writing about it that give you the brand recommendations. And then you have to go check out the brands to see if they are creating the styles that you want. And if not, then, you as a customer, and I can only say this, from my experience, is I know that, typically sales will, go through the comment section, and get feedback, and then we actually have meeting in design and production, and addressing the issue of what customers are saying about sizing. So that's like a thing that, especially nowadays, like you actually have a lot of control of what a brand can do, because at the end of the day, if a brand is not selling their product, the clothes, then you know they have to adapt to a change of your demand, because you are the customer that are demanding, and they are just supplying what you want. So if you're not an active partner, in the conversation of size inclusivity, then brands are not going to change. And again, don't mind the brands that are already established, because the likelihood of them changing is a lot more slower, to be more adaptive. And I think like the emerging brands, if they're starting from day one of doing plus size, they have it set up, you as a target customer. So I want to make sure that you have the proper tools to engage with brands, especially new emerging brands. They're very adaptive and they want to grow. So if they are specifically targeting like a certain size range and you have any fit issues or anything like that, then you could really be in the comment section, write the DMs. You could be an active participant in it. And I know that definitely brands do listen. Especially younger, newer brands. Okay, so that said, again, like women are very like more style aesthetic and more design driven in what they buy, and they don't, and we typically aren't that brand loyal. And I just know that, looking at sales report and things like that, and even like the online source, I get a lot of these reports, so I kind of look at it to see like what customers are buying, whether a style and the design details, or with the silhouette, like what works and what doesn't work. So now going back to the finding your style aesthetic, there are three things to focus on. So if you want to find out your style aesthetic, is to really pay attention to like the design details. So the design details really will gauge on what you would like, right? So I kind of put up like, if you don't like a lot of design details, so usually like you will go for a minimalist. But if you really like a lot of design details, you might go for this aesthetic, which is a maximalist. So you like a lot of bold, intricate designs, right? And also like if you like something that's frilly and like curvy lines, so you might go for a feminine style aesthetic. If you like very much like the tailoring and monochromatic, then edgy style might work for you. So these are the four style aesthetics that I talk about and I reference a lot, and a lot of other style aesthetics are derivatives of a combination of two of these or three or even all of it. You just have to figure out like, what are the design details that you like, what are the color palettes that you like, and then what are the silhouettes. Because each of these four style aesthetic, and if you go and check out on YouTube the style aesthetic, which I talked about last week, I talked about all of this. So I talk about like the colors will also play up in part of it, because you might like a very basic minimal style design detail, but you like the coloring of this, and you can combine both. It's not like you're stuck with one aesthetic and you have to do exactly this, because a lot of design brands, they mix and match these four style aesthetics to create their own brand identity. It's very common, in design. When we study fashion design, we study, based on this. So design, I talk about, and then colors, and then let's talk about silhouettes, right? So silhouettes are your basic cuts, right? So you could go and have a minimalist where you have your simple blazer, your simple jeans. But when you go to the maximalist, you might like, a jacket that has like ruffled leather, um, a lot of like studs, a lot of other details. It's more like the design details are a lot more bolder, and the silhouettes, it might be like the design details of the sleeve might be, a puffy sleeve. So things like that. We're talking about the silhouettes. So you have to kind of figure out like within these four aesthetic, they all have different silhouettes. Again, like this is more basic, this is more like bold and abstract kind of shape, and then these are like more curvier lines in the silhouette, and this is more linear lines. So that's how like we in design kind of distinguish the four. Um, okay. And then I also want to kind of debunk the myth that brands are all inclusive. No brand is all inclusive. It's impossible for a brand to survive and be a profitable business if they're all inclusive. Um, so again, what I recommend is when are looking at a brand, look at who are they using as their first is who are they working with as their influencers. It says a lot about who their brand identity are, who the target customers are. Look at their ad campaigns. Who are they using? What kind of body type are the models in their ad campaign and their influencers? It does say a lot about the brand identity. So you have to find those two connections and see if the brand is using the target customer that's you, that represents you, that you identify with. Okay, and then because I think like I've talked about this. So in design, we use 12 different silhouettes, in body types when we design, and each silhouette has different styles that work to either like enhance or camouflage certain flaws in our body, or enhance like the more to accentuate like the features that we like in our body. So I really want to kind of get you into the mindset of um, no brand is all inclusive, and you just need to find the brand that kind of cut into the silhouette that you could identify with, that represents your body. And I think I've done, two long form videos on YouTube explaining like what the 12 silhouettes are and then the 13 kibi. And just to be clear, in fashion design, we design around silhouettes. Kibi is for styling. So that's the difference. So in fashion design, I don't know too many fashion designers that know kibi, much less use kibi. But for sure, every fashion designer who designs around a silhouette and shape, and you need to kind of identify what those silhouettes and shapes are to see if that brand fits into your body type. And once you find the brands, try to be more brand loyal to them, because I can say that um, having worked in fashion is usually the life cycle of a fashion designer, not the creative director or the head designer, um, or of an eponymous brand, or like their own eponymous brand and things like that, right? So usually like the assistant associate designers, the life cycle is like 3 to 5 years with a brand. So don't be so stuck up of a brand about what their design is this season. Check back like every year to see and what they're putting out, because sometimes you know a designer in the back end will bring new energy and bring new design into the brand. I think like right now there is a new designer in J. Crew, and there's also a revamp on to Banana Republic. And I don't know if any of you remember, but back in like the early 2000s, I think like Banana Republic also did something like this where they had the heritage brand under Banana Republic. And also when Jenna Lyons was in J. Crew, it was also different. So that's why I said just check back. Don't also assume that the brand is gonna put out the same product year after year. That's not what fashion's about. They will keep their core aesthetic, but the designs depends on the designer on the team. So just keep that in mind. Um, okay. So the other thing I want to point out is pay attention to the designer, because I can say that having worked for so many different brands, the way that the team, when it's led by a designer that's a man, is very different than when the team is led by a woman who's a designer, who's the head designer. Typically, when I've worked under a woman who was the head designer, usually like the way we fit, we actually find a fit model that's more realistic, with some slightly imperfect, flaws with our body, because we want to address, like some brands will target certain things, right, of what a woman's flawed body is, right, and kind of design and make it like camouflage it or accentuate like different parts. So I know that we definitely fit, with actual. We really focus on the fit model and the fit of an actual body on all the issues, right? And I can say that typically when I work under a designer who is a man, they are very stuck on the aesthetic ideal of the women's body, because they don't understand what our issues are, and the way that men perceive like how they want to wear clothes. I can say that men like to have big broad shoulders, and they like their arm to look big. So usually they like the sleeve to be a little bit tighter fit, and women like it a little bit looser because we don't want to have the chicken fat, cutlet thing kind of hanging and flapping. So, and we don't want like shoulders, like a football player kind of thing. So it's just like a different set of rules, So it's so I just definitely see like in my experience is typically, when there is a woman in the helm, the clothes actually fit better, and they actually outsell more than the men. And the amount of times I get returns um, when it's a brand ran by men, it's a lot more, and we have to adapt to a lot more of the fit issues. And typically, like the fit model is usually a model from the runway, which I really it annoys me to no end. I've worked for a brand that refused to put a size 12 6 years into the brand before they started to put a size 12, but they were willing, from the year one I was with the brand, that they were willing to do a double size zero. So that's the difference between men and women at the helm. Um, yeah, it's just very interesting. Um, okay. So I am gonna take some of your questions if you have any, and if not, I'm gonna wrap up because I actually have dinner plans and I actually go home and like do a quick change before I head out to dinner. So let's see. J J Crew's come back after years of being stagnant. Yes. I think like they act so. I think that I only guessing based on like what I've heard about J. Crew. I think that there was um, different leadership under the brand, and they had suffered an identity crisis, and I think they were gearing towards like a younger preppy audience. But I feel like they missed their market because you know, for someone like me, who grew up, shopping at J. Crew, in my teens, in my 20s, during my college before I entered into fashion and working for fashion brands where, you know, I usually typically work for brands that I like their clothes, so I work for them so I could get like some kind of brand discount or some kind of clothing allowance, so I could buy into the brand. But before then, I know that I've shopped, and I typically, when you have a customer that's shopping for so long, you kind of want to grow into the audience, and I think that so many people have shopped J. Crew, during their um, later high school and the college years and even their first job, kind of thing, because that was the core aesthetic of the brand. I think that was the brand identity. I think that they could have done like you know the the J. Crew college kid who went into the first job, like they could have built more on that, but that they kind of reverted back to the very beginning. And I think at that time also, the way they revamped it was they were competing with Abercrombie, and Abercrombie was just slaughtering. um, and I think that that was what went wrong. And I think also like um, a lot of the thing is that fast fashion had taken a lot of the runway looks and just made it too readily available. And I think people just want to have looks from the runway, and it just being making clothes very accessible, was also a problem, because I don't think people appreciate, their own personal style anymore once fashion was so accessible, Um, and I think nowadays everyone's talking about, how fast fashion has deteriorated, and yes, it has deteriorated, and I think, the reason why is such a deterioration of fashion brands and all across the spectrum, even the workmanship. I mean, like I saw the Olivier Roustain's Jean Paul Gaultier's runway show, like the workmanship, I was very disappointed. It wasn't like the design wasn't there, but for a couture show, um, that's not what I expect, And I know that they have access to, really talented people who can do couture um, workmanship. So yeah, um, it was very interesting. So anyway, again, just to recap, today's episode is about finding brands for your personal style. And again, just to say, like, brands aren't also all inclusive for everyone. No brand is. You need to find a brand that is specifically target to you as the target customer. And again, you know in recent years, there are more inclusive brands. Check out the new and emerging brands. There are so many articles writing about, new brands. There are so many fashion journalists writing about it. So do an internet search and, support the newer brands if you want size inclusivity, if you want to really like, you know, so yeah, so if you really want to go and like pursue brands that have you as a target customer and help them build a brand for you, like engage with the DMs, engage with the product, the comment sections. Like online nowadays, like every brand has some kind of product review. Be engaged in it, give your feedback, because I guarantee you, like from working with so many brands, sales people do read on it. I mean, I sometimes, if I have time, I go do the reports. If I see something that's a problem, we take that information very seriously, because you are the target customer, and we want you to buy the clothes, so we have to pay attention to it. And that's why sometimes, like, you see a brand sticking to a certain design, and then they change. They sometimes change because the feedback of what was put out didn't sell. The styles might be great, but it didn't fit to the general public. And the general public didn't buy into it, even though they shot it with a model and it looked great in the model, but for the general consumer, it doesn't work. So That's why sometimes a brand will change. And another thing is, again, I said like designers typically have like a 3 to 5 year life cycle with any design brand, and then they would jump ship and go to another brand. I've seen it way too many times, and typically like, when that happens, that's when also a brand's the designs change, and sometimes people in production change. That also affects the quality, um, and sometimes it's just like if things didn't sell or they change their um, price point and things like that. There's a lot of things affecting it. So that's why I say don't just assume that a brand, what you think of a brand is going to be consistent. Always check back to see what the brand is going to put out. And again, I say like wardrobe curation is a long game. So you actually have to go and check back with brands and see if they are putting out products that you want to buy, all the stuff. So um, that's how you find the brands that fit into your personal style, is to really shop. And I've said it many times, shopping is not buying. Shopping is to browse, to look for things, put things on your shopping cart, let it sit. Do you want it? Can you create multiple outfits with it? All the stuff you have to factor in. So, and then you also have to see, don't don't buy into you know um, the size inclusivity with established brands. I can say very rarely if a brand is successful and established, do they change their business model and sizing, because to change the sizing scale and to revamp it is very expensive to do. And typically if a brand is established and they are performing well and they can sell the clothes, they're not going to change and they're going to add sizing. I gave an example that I was with a brand. Um, they did a 00 within the first year I was there. It took them 6 years to add a size 12 into their business model. So that's why I say like you know the established brands are very very slow to adapt to change, and the younger brands, because they're trying to get the foot and trying to get like build their customer base, they are more adaptive. They are more willing to change because they are not so big that they can't scale and change. Usually within 5 year timeline, I would say that brands are very adaptive. After the 5 year mark, then it's a little harder. So I hope that you are able to take some information that I've shared with you today, um, and help you find the brands for your personal style. And again, the three things to focus on is the design, the colors, and the silhouettes. Um, yeah. So anyway, if you missed this session, again, it's gonna play. It's gonna replay next week on YouTube, and then next week I will come back with another episode of Personal Style. So thank you for joining me, and since you don't have any more comments, I am gonna sign off. And thank you for joining me. Bye.